Welcome to Moral Monday. Thank you for being here. Very happy to have everyone here this evening. We'll hear from some great speakers. We've already heard some wonderful music. We'd like to begin with prayer. Would you join me in prayer? Almighty and merciful God, we remember before you all those who are neglected, whom it would be easy for us to forget. The homeless and the destitute, the old and the sick, and all who have none to care for them. Help us to heal those who are broken in body or spirit, and to turn their sorrow into joy. Look with pity, O Heavenly Father, upon the people in this land who live with injustice, terror, disease, and death as their constant companions. Have mercy upon us. Help us to eliminate our cruelty to these our neighbors. Strengthen those who spend their lives establishing equal protection of the law and equal opportunities for all. And grant that every one of us may enjoy a fair portion of the riches of this land. And grant, O God, holy and life-giving Spirit may so move every human heart that barriers which divide us may crumble, suspicions disappear, and hatred cease. That our divisions being healed, we may live in justice and peace. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Jonathan. Is the moral resistance alive in Franklin, North Carolina? Yeah! Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Enrique Gomez. I am president of the Jackson County NAACP branch. You doing okay? Yeah. How are we doing? I have a question for you. How many of you had to drive through all these mountain roads to get here? Raise your hands. All right, look. If you are driving a mountain road one day and you get into an accident, the natural conclusion is that it was you, individual folks. Please put the phone down and drive. But if in the same stretch of road, in the same year, there are 30 accidents and nowhere else in the county you see the same numbers, a responsible person, a moral person stops blaming the accidents on the individual drivers and asks, is there something wrong with this road? We live in the time in which we live oppressed by distorted moral narratives perpetrated by extremists under the guise of religious piety. It is a distorted morality that proclaims that the only moral issues are prayer in schools and abortion and gun rights. There are moral issues that are concerned with how our society treats the poor, those on the margin. The least of this, women, LGBTQ folks, workers, immigrants, the disabled, and the sick. We are oppressed by the words of religious leaders that have abandoned their moral compass for the sake of becoming court evangelicals. And we are the people of the mountains, people of all denominations and political parties, people of faith and people not of faith, people who believe in the moral arc of the universe. We are here to proclaim that there is a rooted moral analysis based on our deepest religious and constitutional values that demand justice for all. We need a moral revival. A revival is necessary to save the heart and the soul of our democracy and the lives of the men, women, and children of these mountains. There are moral issues. When the poverty rate in Jackson County has increased by 5% since 2008, is this a moral issue? Yes. Is it a moral issue? Yes. Someone say, it's a moral issue. When Jackson, Macon, and Clay counties are considered food deserts for lack of available nutritional choices, what is that? It's a moral issue. When 1 in 4 children in Macon County is hungry regularly, it is a moral issue. When 1 in 10 seniors in Swain County is hungry regularly, it is a moral issue. When nobody in WNC, Western North Carolina, can work 40 hours a week at minimum wage and afford a 2-bedroom apartment, it is a moral issue. When unemployment is low and yet real wages have decreased everywhere, it is a moral issue. When in North Carolina we have cut back on per pupil spending by 15% since 2008, it is a moral issue. And when in just 4 American families own as much wealth as 40% of the entire population, it is a moral issue. When in Western North Carolina there is 17 opioid overdose deaths per 100,000 people, it is a moral issue. And when in North Carolina today 4 people died because of overdoses, it is a moral issue. And this is what we're going to do today. We're going to be talking about issues that are persistent, that are not being addressed sufficiently enough. We are going to be hearing from John DeVille, history teacher from Franklin High School. Where's John?
He'll be back.
He'll be back. Okay. We are going to be hearing from Caleb McCoy II, talking about the opioid crisis. We are going to be talking about with Roberta Baulis, a former OB nurse at Angel Medical Center here in Franklin. And we are going to be hearing from the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman about what we can do about this. One favor, there should be these cards right here. These are pledge cards. This is how we know that you're pledging that you are going to vote during early voting and also in November. And when is the election? November 6th. Thank you. So this is going to be sort of a reminder. We will be keeping up with you so that make sure that you're doing and to encourage your neighbors to vote. We will be collecting this before the end of the rally today. I want to thank everybody here for coming in and spending some time with us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce, we have our very own chair, NAACP Chair of Communications. We have Dan Cole. Dan.
Hello. Wow. Okay. So I'm used to teaching, so yes. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm counting almost 80 people, and we're all spread out, so it doesn't look like a lot, but that's a pretty good room full of people. And yes, this is so needed. That what's going on. How many people know somebody who's affected by a lack of a good wage in this county, in this area? How many people know somebody who's struggling to pay the bills? Some of us are struggling to pay the bills. How many of us know somebody who has struggled to find good housing that doesn't have mold and is affordable? Anybody struggling? Do you know somebody who's struggling with housing? Yes. Does anybody know anybody who has struggled with opioids or other addictions? Has that affected anybody you know? Yes. Do you know anybody who has been affected by the shutdown of the labor and delivery and other services here in Macon County? Yes. All of these things are decisions that are made, and they should be being made by our community, but too often they're being made far, far away in Raleigh or not at all. And the people, we the people, are struggling. And we're going to hear some stories of folks who are on the front lines, who have experienced some of these things, and we want to share those things because those stories are what's most powerful, is when somebody tells what they have been through. That's when our hearts open. So please be receptive to everybody here today. I'd like to first thank Father Jonathan of All Saints Episcopal Church who did our invocation. Father John, thank you. And he will be back to wrap up at the end with a brief statement and benediction. You have heard from our president of Jackson County NAACP, Enrique Gomez, in purple. Yes. And let's see. And right now, yes, I'm the communications chair, and I have to apologize. I should have communicated better to get more people to come here today. But I tried, and apparently I didn't try good enough. But thank you for coming here. That's what's important. Up next, we have John DeVille, who teaches history at Franklin High School. He's also a member of the NAACP, and he has been a long-term public education advocate. John, please step forward.
How do you tell a social studies nerd teacher? He brings a podium in his car.
You want me to set up the mic?
No, sure.
All right. Where are you going?
Right there.
You got it.
I want Kevin Corbin to be able to hear me.
All right.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
That's a little better. Dan, thank you very much. My name again is John DeVille. I'm honored to speak to you this evening, and I'm honored to share the stage with Reverend Spearman and our other speakers this evening. I've been a social studies teacher at Franklin High School for 23 years, and I'm a proud member of the North Carolina NAACP. I was asked by Dan to speak to you this evening about the topic of a living wage. The polite thing to say tonight is that it's hard to live properly without making a living wage. But that would be polite. I did not come here tonight to be polite. I came here to tell you the truth. I came here to say that it's an ugly lie that you can live properly without making a living wage. You can survive, but you won't live properly. I'm not talking about luxuries. I'm talking about a dignified and healthy life in America, in North Carolina, in Macon County, in Franklin. And that's impossible without a living wage. It's impossible to take care of your health without a living wage. It's impossible to raise your children without a living wage. It's impossible to take care of your parents without a living wage. What is a living wage? A single person in Macon County needs to make at least $10.69 an hour to make a living wage, about $21,000 a year. 2 adults with 1 child, each parent needs to be making $20.76 an hour to be making a living wage, raising that child. Right here where we're sitting tonight, here in the center of Franklin, the median family income is $33,000. That's not really cutting it. That's 2 wage earners and probably 1 or 2 or 3 children. 18.5% of the population for whom the poverty status has been determined here in Macon County, 18.4% are in poverty. That's 6,100 out of 33,000 people here in Macon County are below the poverty line, a number that's higher than the national average. 75% of the people in poverty in Macon County are white. The federal minimum wage peaked in 1968 at $8.68 an hour. That's in 2016 dollars. Since it was last raised in 2009 to the current level of $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum has lost about 9.6% of its purchasing power due to inflation. Since 1973, American productivity has increased by 77%, while hourly pay has only grown by 12%. If the federal minimum wage tracked productivity, it would be more than $20 an hour, not today's poverty wage of $7.25. We are told daily through the media, through our lawmakers, that minimum wage jobs are meant to be temporary, that they're a way station on your way to bigger and better things, to higher paying jobs. But with the tremendous income inequality, the lack of economic mobility, locked into place by those who hold tremendous power and wealth, that's also a lie. We've cut taxes in this state for the wealthy and for corporations while raising taxes on the working class with new taxes for car repairs, plumber and electrician bills, higher tuitions at public universities, and so on. Low-wage workers, make no mistake, they are not looking for a handout. They're looking for economic fairness, for a hand up, instead of the powerful trying to crush them economically and spiritually. Most poor people work, and they work exceptionally hard. No job is beneath them. They are the essential foundation for everything else. Consider where you work. What would your workplace, what would your life be if minimum wage workers did not show up? The Bureau of Labor Statistics defines a working poor person as someone who is below the poverty line, who's been there for at least 6 months, or they're looking for employment. In 2016, there were 7.5 million Americans who fell into that category. Most working poor people are over 35, while fewer than 5 in 100 are between the ages of 16 and 19. In other words, the working poor are not primarily teenagers who are bagging groceries and flipping burgers. Low-wage workers are adults. They're parents. They're wiping down hotel showers and toilets. They're taking food orders. They're bussing tables. They're working at Walmart. They're working at a daycare center. They're emptying our trash cans. They're stacking grocery shelves at midnight. They're teaching community college students as an adjunct professor at Western Carolina University. If you work as a full-time adjunct professor, your wages are about $22,000 a year with no benefits. That's an adjunct professor. And many adults, yes, are also bagging groceries and flipping burgers. Working harder and longer isn't an option for a lot of folks because they don't know their schedule. 20 years ago, I had students that were working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. They could work 2 minimum wage jobs. They could work themselves to death and make more money. Because of schedules that aren't predictable, you can't do that anymore. We have to confront the power structures in this country and make it clear that this is unacceptable. We have to comfort the afflicted, and we have to afflict the comfortable until they yield to the American worker what is just, what is right, what is fair, long-term, and in their own best interest. It is not only in their interest as a group that they might want to avoid being afflicted, but in the consumer-driven economy, if consumers have no money, they can't consume. If consumers can't consume, that this causes the economy to collapse, or, this is what we've seen, especially since 2008, but really for the last 30 years, it leads governments to borrow more money. And it's not just the United States that's running record deficits. All developed countries right now are running record deficits. We're leaving huge debts to our children and our grandchildren. That's not prudent. That's not conservative. It's insane and it's immoral. Senator Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, Speaker Paul Ryan, promised us last year a $4,000 raise with last year's tax cut for the super wealthy. Please raise your hand if you got a $4,000 raise. Most of you probably didn't get even 10% of that. Consider this illustration from the airline industry. Over 46,000, this is a mind-boggling set of numbers here. 46,000 airport workers and their families live below the poverty line. They collectively absorb $1.2 billion in public benefits, including food stamps and Medicaid. In other words, the taxpayers are providing corporate welfare for the airlines. Fox News will say it's a handout to freeloaders, and they're right. Those freeloaders have a name. United, Delta, Southwest, JetBlue, American. You know their names. Airline industry profits have soared. They've gone from $10.5 billion in 2013 to, check this out, $38 billion last year. Annual executive salaries are ballooning to hundreds of times more than frontline worker wages while they've smashed unions. Where's the justice, the fairness, the morality? Trickle-down economics does not work. We proved it in the 1920s, the 1980s, the early 2000s, and we're proving it again right now. What does work is people being paid a living wage. When we lift up the dispossessed, all boats rise, and we all win. We win economically, we win morally, and we win spiritually. Forward together. Thank you very much.
you, John, again. Thank you so much. Okay, up next we have Caleb McCoy II, who's a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee, and he is in long-term recovery. He's going to tell us about what's going on, what's been going on, and where do we go from here. Thank you for opening up and sharing your story.
How's everybody doing today? Good, good. So my name is the amazing Caleb McCoy II, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is I now have a loving relationship with God and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. For 14 years I struggled, and I didn't realize that I was amazing. I didn't realize that I had value to this world. And so for 14 years I struggled with meth addiction, with opiates and stuff like that. And I overdosed 6 times. 3 of those times I had to be brought back with Narcan. And before my life started changing, it took me being able to look into the mirror and understanding the person looking back at me. As soon as I realized that, things started looking up. I want to share just a little something with y'all. If we can do a little group activity. So I want you to look at the person next to you, and I want you to call them all the things that you can think of that deal with stigma when it comes to addiction. Things like felon or junkie, worthless. I want you to look at the person next to you. I want you to call them those things. Go ahead, guys. Look them in the eyes and call them that. Because we've all been guilty of it. We've used words like that. But go ahead. I want you to do it for just a second. Okay. How does it feel? How did that feel to say that to somebody? So for so long, that stops people from reaching out. Whenever we don't see people for people, we miss the mark to have a chance to transform somebody's life. I want you to look at that person again. I want you to call them the things that God calls us: son, daughter, blessed and highly favored, more than a conqueror. I want you to look at that person. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to speaking life into them. Tell them they're amazing. Alright, guys. Like I said, that's how we transform lives. When we see one another the way God sees us. But for so long, I didn't understand that the words that you and I use are so much stronger than any of the substances that people are addicted to. So that's one thing that we can do to help change this epidemic. We're losing people every day. Personally, I've lost over 30 family members and friends, that was close to me. I lost my aunt recently she had an infection dealing with her IV drug use. I've lost so many people, and the stigma keeps people from seeking help. When you see somebody walking up and down the street, it don't cost a thing to stop and ask them if they need some water. Be careful about doing that, obviously, but just take opportunities to see people for people to speak, because there's so many people hurting out there that need your life. They need you to speak life into them. So it's important that we don't see the people for their experiences, their struggles, their circumstances that they're going through. Secondly, I want to encourage y'all to get out and vote. I want you to vote for the leaders that understand that we cannot arrest our way out of this epidemic. Vote for the leaders who have a track record of showing compassion and are open to new ideas, outside the box ideas. See, the first war on drugs was declared in 1914, and we're still trying to arrest our way out of this. It's going to take new ideas. It's going to take new programs in the jail. It's going to take reaching people that come to the hospital that's just overdosed, reaching out to them and trying to offer them help, hook them up with different services. Going into the schools, that's one thing that we really are involved in. We've been into Swain County, we've been into Cherokee, Jackson County, and just having those conversations with the kids. You know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's important to break those barriers down and to open up that dialogue with the kids, especially the kids. The national average age for first-time drug use is 11 years old. So it's happening. I mean, in elementary school and middle school. Me personally, I started when I was 11, 12. By the time I was 16, I was using meth. And so, you know, we got to have those conversations. We need those programs in the schools. The most important thing that we can do is talk about the message of recovery. You know, I hear people say recovery is possible. It's more than that. It's not a fad. It's not something that, you know, people are just talking about. It's happening every day. Recovery happens every day, and so we should be celebrating those people that's in recovery, that's doing things. Whether it's a small victory, whether it's just, you know, for me, it was a big thing for me to take a shower when I got in recovery. I used to sleep on couch to couch for, you know, 2 weeks. I'd go without eating or, you know, taking a shower. So it's important to celebrate those people that's in recovery. But we have to lock arms. Whatever it is that we do, we just need to set aside our differences, and we have to lock arms and just keep spreading that message. And like I said, get in there, get out, and elect the leaders that's going to make change. All right. Thank y'all. God bless.
All right. Thank you, Caleb. Caleb, that was amazing. So many things. Let me just adjust this a little bit. Hope. Isn't that what we all need more of in this world? Is hope. And celebrating our humanity, what we all have in common. And I'm going to segue a little bit, but I'm going to talk a little bit too about health care. Because we all, I don't care how rich or how poor you are, we all need health care at some point in our lives. And that needs to be fully funded. It needs to be at the local level. We need recovery services at the local level, in the jails, in the prisons, in the community, wherever that is. Mental health issues. I think that goes hand in glove sometimes with some of these other issues. That needs to be fully funded so people can get the help that they need. I played music with an incredibly talented musician. I mean, I played with a lot of musicians before. This guy was phenomenal. But the stuff he's dealing with from childhood and his ongoing family situations and different issues, he's just not living in the real world. And he ends up in jail. He's not a bad guy. He's a great guy. But he's got issues, and you don't have money to deal with that, and there he ends up in jail. He could be playing on any stage anywhere with his own music, but he's in jail because he's not getting the help that he needs. And I think, Caleb, you also mentioned talking about our politicians. Our representatives need to represent us, and not just those who give lots of money to their campaigns. And so when you look at the priorities, that was one of the focal points going into today of what are the concrete issues and concrete steps we can let our candidates know this month. Say, look, what are you going to do about this issue? What is your stand on opioids? What is your stand on affordable housing? What is your stand on a living wage? What is your stand about angel labor and delivery, about health care insurance in the state? What is your stand? And we can vote accordingly. But too often, some of our so-called leaders want to get into these issues, things about this or that, about social issues that are not exactly 100% in line with the reality of people aren't making enough money, even though they're working 2 and 3 jobs. People don't have the resources they need to live a healthy life. And these are the things that we need to have our leaders talking about and making decisions about. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Roberta Bowles, and she was the nurse manager at Angel Labor and Delivery for 26 years. So please welcome Roberta Bowles.
That's fine. Thank you.
Don't be afraid.
All right. It's hard to follow this group of people that have spoken before me. I'm not much of a public speaker, so I'll do the best I can. But it has been over a year since the Labor and Delivery Unit has closed. It closed a year ago, July 14th. I'll never forget that day. The 45 nurses that I worked with, many of them for that 26 years, have all been displaced but are now working elsewhere. We all drive anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to work every day when we work. The patients that have been displaced are also traveling that number of hours. I have seen many patients from Franklin and the surrounding communities at the hospital I'm in now. I drive to Hendersonville, North Carolina, and work at Park Ridge Hospital. I have delivered babies in the lobby. I've delivered babies on the side of the road, babies in hallways, because they have had to drive so far to get to a birthplace and have their babies. So by the time they get there, the baby is not waiting any longer. The hospital in Park Ridge, before the hospitals in Transylvania, Spruce Pine, and Franklin, before they closed, the birth rate at Park Ridge was less than 500 a year. We are now up to 700 or more a year. So people are coming from the surrounding communities because there are no other options, especially in Franklin, Hayesville, Bryson City, any of the hospitals. Silva is getting a large portion of the, Silva is getting a large portion of the deliveries from Franklin, but there's still a lot of people who choose to go elsewhere. I recently witnessed the birth of my own daughter. She lives in Asheville, North Carolina, and we were driving to Greenville, South Carolina for her to have her baby, and we had a frantic road trip to Greenville because she was in active labor, and we thought we were going to have to deliver her baby in the car. Over the past year, I again witnessed that our government, our leaders, like everyone has been talking about, has put the welfare and the health of women and children at the lowest priority. The voices of women are not heard in our country. We need leaders to make the health care of all our citizens, but especially women and children, a priority. I see a lot of faces in this audience that was helpful in trying to fight the closure of the Labor and Delivery Unit, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you. We didn't succeed, but I haven't given up. I want to thank Bob Scott because he has been a loud voice in asking the questions and trying to get the health care for women and children to stay in our own community. We need more of those kind of leaders. As a nurse for over 40 years, I have seen health care improvements in the care of women and children. The viability now of a fetus born preterm is 23 weeks. When I started nursing, it was like 27 to 30. So that is the milestones that we have made in the care of neonates in our neonatal intensive care units. But even with that said, women are dying every year in childbirth. Last year alone, over 900 women died giving birth. That is the largest of any developed country. The CDC said 60% of those deaths were preventable. And the reasons for the deaths are as follows. Low-income women in rural areas. Where do we live? That's what our women are facing. Unplanned pregnancies. I mean, it's really sad when Medicaid will pay for Viagra, but it won't pay for birth control. Chronic health conditions that women don't seek treatment for. They don't have insurance, they don't have money, or they have to travel with small children just to get to a hospital that can take care of these conditions. Increase in C-section rates. The C-section rate in America is now 33%. That is the highest of any developed country. Other country, that is 3 times more than most developed countries. Fragmented healthcare systems. We all know what that's like. We've experienced it firsthand. The United States federal and state funding for women and children's health is only 6% of the total budget. So you can see how much that would pay for. And medical students who are completing their residencies, some of them never spend a day in a labor and delivery unit. So those are the reasons CDC claims are the reasons for the accelerating maternal mortality. And we also have infant mortality. We had finally gotten that rate down as low as we thought we could, and it's back up where I started. It is access to health care. It is the lack of money and resources for women to get to hospitals, to get the care they need for these conditions. We all want to improve the health of our communities, and like Dan said, that needs to be local. You can't keep a full-time job, take care of children at home, and drive 2 hours for a doctor's appointment. Pregnant women are seen monthly until their 8th month, and then they're seen twice a week, and then once a week until the baby is born. How do you drive to Asheville or Greenville every time you have a doctor's appointment? We need to have our voices heard, and that's through voting. So I hope that all of you will vote for health care and help us get our local health back in our own community. So we have put together a petition today to try to ask HCA, who has purchased Mission Hospitals, to put labor and delivery back into Franklin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. You have a deep knowledge and of not only the issues, but the people who have come through labor and delivery over the years. And we've got somebody who's just experienced a real hardship, and I'm so amazingly grateful that you're willing to share. Please, thanks, right into the mic, Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brooke, and I recently found myself in the position where I needed emergency care here in Franklin. Recently, my family and I found out that we were expecting. We were overjoyed, and I had the foreknowledge to know that I needed to establish myself with a doctor in Asheville to ensure that we could have someone we knew at the delivery. But I also went ahead and established myself with Missions Women's Care in Franklin. Unfortunately, on the morning of September 22nd, which was a Saturday, I found myself at home experiencing a miscarriage that had significant blood loss. I drove myself to the emergency room, made plans for my 5-year-old to be cared for. But what was most surprising in all of this is that no OB could be called on the weekend. There was no one there who knew how to care for me. So what unfolded was one of the scariest days of my life. I lay bleeding in a hospital and repeatedly got blood tests just to see how far my hemoglobin had dropped. I never really had a doctor that told me things were going to be okay or what was happening with me. There were a lot of phone calls being made outside of my room. One very poignant thing I think that's important for us all to know is during that 4-hour time span, I couldn't speak to a doctor or anything, but someone found the time to come in and collect my $594 copay. which I think was just showed a huge lack of situational awareness and compassion. So at the 4-hour mark, I found myself being loaded into an ambulance, and I went lights and sirens to an ER in Asheville. That is extremely nauseating going backwards over the mountain at such a speed. When I found myself in Asheville, they didn't know I was coming. I was parked in a hallway, and I got to vomit into a waste receptacle in front of everyone. I met a new ER doctor who didn't appear to have any rationale or information about who I was or why I'd come there. So, mind you, I was a very exhausted and tired and nauseous woman who had lost a lot of blood just trying to advocate for myself and keep it together. So I had a new ER doctor, a new nurse, and a new Asheville doctor I hadn't met. So thankfully he was from the practice I had established myself with. So we got to discuss having a DNC surgery. And I met 2 more nurses, an anesthesiologist, and a nurse anesthetist. And I can't help but wonder if I had been addressed at home and if so many hours hadn't elapsed, how my care would have been different and if I would have made any decisions differently. I was able to advocate for myself enough to get some extra nausea medication in the form of a 3-day patch to make it for the 90-minute ride home, because I was wheeled to the curb at 9:30 p.m. that night and sent on my way. I suppose you don't truly understand the impact of the loss of healthcare access until you need it. I don't think any of us knew how bare bones it was. We knew you couldn't deliver a child here, but we also didn't know that you had no access to an OB. I've made the calls, I've filled out surveys, and I have heard remorse and statements that begin with, well, in a perfect world. And I have to say, your verbal remorse doesn't bear weight. True remorse is backed by changed action. This is my way of honoring our child's loss, and I hope that we can hold people accountable for the decisions they make for our community. I don't want this to happen to another family.
Thank you, Brooke. That was... That's unacceptable. This is the wealthiest nation in the world. This is not a healthcare system. That's a crime. The push by Mission has been going to sell to a for-profit, but even before they were selling to a for-profit, they were acting as if they were for-profit. This was our community hospital that people here paid to keep open in the 70s. And now it's being dictated from Asheville. And then it's going to be dictated somewhere, what is it, Memphis, Tennessee? Is where HCA, a for-profit corporation, is out of. So now we've got to go petition way over there. This is not the America that we grew up in or we believed in. This is an ugly, shameful chapter in our history when we let corporate boards make decisions little by little, taking away our rights to the most basic fundamental health care. No OBs on the weekends? Sorry, ladies, nothing we can do. That's a crime. I don't know what to say, but I will wrap it up there. And thank you, Brooke, again, for that. Was horrendous to go through that. I can't even imagine.
we're doing a quick change. We're doing a quick change right here to a new speaker stand. But when we do that, just to remind you, we do have these cards right here, so reminder cards. If you could please make sure to fill out, and we're going to go around and collect them in a little while. And also, we have that petition, that Angel Labor and Delivery petition circling out. We have it on that table over there. We have it on the table over there.
1, 2, 3. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. We good? Okay. You can hear me clap once. If you can hear me clap twice. If you can hear me clap 3 times. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jill, for setting that up. Okay, that should be then that should be off already. Okay. It is my honor to introduce to you the president of the North Carolina NAACP State Conference of Branches, the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman. Reverend Dr. Spearman is an ordained minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church denomination and has been a pastor of St. Philip's AME Zion Church in Greensboro, North Carolina since 2014. Reverend Dr. Spearman has worked in correctional institutions, hospitals, colleges, and community-based programs as a substance abuse counselor. The Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman has a bachelor's degree from Mercy College, a Master of Divinity from Hood Theological Seminary, and a Doctor of Ministry from the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. So Reverend Dr. Spearman has been a servant leader of the NAACP in North Carolina in the historic Thousands on Jones Street movement and the Moral Monday movement, now going 5 years on. He has been a plaintiff in 3 lawsuits challenging policies in the state government. And in 2016, Spearman played an important role in the voter suppression litigation that resulted in a great public outcry about the voter ID and other legislation that would suppress in minority and poor white communities, the vote in minority and poor white communities. The Richmond Court of Appeals overturned this legislation because of this lawsuit. And Reverend Dr. Spearman lost his nephew just a few days ago. Reverend Spearman feels strongly that there were profound inequities in the healthcare system which his nephew was a victim to, and I am deeply appreciate that he would join us today in this time of mourning. I want to give him my deepest condolences. Reverend Spearman, please give him a hand.
When I say, what do you want? You say justice. What do you want?
Justice.
What do you want?
Justice.
When I say, when do you want it? You say now. When do you want it?
Now.
When do you want it?
Now.
When I say, how do you get it? You say vote. How do you get it?
Vote.
How do you get it?
Vote.
How do you get it?
Vote.
How do you get it?
Vote.
Greetings, Macon County NAACP. I'm so grateful to be with you this evening. Allow me to thank those who organized this Macon Moral Monday. President Enrique Gomez, the President of Transylvania County, and the President of Henderson. Are any of the members from Henderson here? Any of the members from Transylvania here? Any of the members from Macon County here? All right, Franklin, Jackson, it's good to be with you this evening. It warms my heart to know that you seek to build power for yourselves based on the understanding that all politics are local. If we are to usher change into our communities, then we need to keep a keen eye on the local politicians who entrench us in the policies that most affect our day-to-day living. If more people understood that, the tide of midterm elections would certainly turn around. And it appears to me that you've heard the 1963 mandate of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reverberating through the annals of time, that if change is to be wrought, then we must go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia, to Louisiana, and go back to our respective locales and resist until change is ushered in. I commend you for adhering to that mandate to sound the alarm and resist. Resistance should be understood as an undermining, a subverting of cultural norms that have a tendency to perpetuate injustice and fear. And I'm glad to be a part of that resistance tonight, especially when I ponder over some of the persistent structural barriers to equality that wrestle against the NAACP's goal to support pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensure economic sustainability and those that work against our efforts to protect and expand voting rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, immigrant rights, and the fundamental principle of equal protection under the law. I don't mind if you give that a round of applause. But tonight, as Enrique said, I am personally gripped by the structural barrier that prevents health care for all by ensuring access to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion. That inhumane structural barrier claimed the life of my 44-year-old nephew last week, and the family is engulfed in grief. Contrary to popular belief, it was not God's will that he should die. It was man's greed, it was man's insensitivity, and it was man's inhumanity to man. I mean, if we are going to become true opponents of oppression in a land where rather than fighting poverty, the wealthy fight the poor, in a land where a powerful and continuing nationalism and disdain for human rights blocks the way for Medicaid expansion, in a land where the military and rampant sexism reigns supreme, in a land where an obsession with national security is up in your face common and corporate power is so protected that you wonder whether the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were ever really ratified at all. When you live in that kind of land, you'll need to resist in power and get out the vote. In a place where the little people are robbed of the honest wages of their toil, robbed of the substance of their citizenship by murder and intimidation, outraged by enemies and deserted by friends, you'll need to resist in power and get out the vote. Between jobs with no insurance, my nephew Goldie could not purchase his blood pressure medications for nearly 2 months, and his kidneys and heart failed him. All I can say is woe to those who make unjust laws and issue oppressive decrees. Woe to those who call evil good and good they call evil. And woe to those who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Your day is coming, and I hope it comes real soon. And I want you to know tonight that through an absentee ballot, I have already cast my vote. Yet in the midst of my grief, I had to be here with you tonight to help you shine a light on the atrocities in your community. Atrocities like the opioid crisis. You are at the epicenter, affecting primarily poor rural whites in the region. And I want you to know tonight that I've had to work on myself with this one because of the racial dichotomies that often creep in. I have witnessed firsthand the marginalization of blacks and other minorities when it comes to substance abuse and even the language used to describe those in the throes of it. Thank you, Caleb, for your witness tonight. We are known to throw out epithets like dope fiend, crackhead, and dope addict when referring to those with less resources, but dignified terms when referring to those with more resources, like paraprofessionals and white-collar workers. All of my life, I have watched folk living through so-called opioid crises before it was called an opioid crisis. If the truth be told, drugs, prescription or otherwise, do not discriminate, and I must refrain from discriminating too. That is, when I know full well how things are in this world. If we are to move forward together, whether we're people of faith, people of no faith, people of color, white or black, rich or poor, gay or straight, young or old, educated or uneducated, every last one of us has been created in the image and likeness of God. So each of our lives, I said each of our lives, carries intrinsic worth. We must find creative ways to deal with this opioid crisis. And my good friends from Policy Watch tell me that death from opioid overdose now takes more lives yearly than car accidents. In 2016, death from opioid overdose was 5 times higher than it had been in 1999. Between 2000 and 2016, more than 600,000 people died from drug overdoses. 115 Americans have already died today from opioid overdose, and that just ain't right. We must continue to shine a light and sound the alarm. You, right here in Franklin, can also bear witness to the long-reaching tentacles created by the refusal to expand Medicaid and ensure health care access for all. Does anybody care that this is a life and death situation? You have seen firsthand how it points to man's inhumanity to man and the moral turpitude of our state. Watching the trends of privatization corrupt the system and corrode the quality of life is signal enough. Residents of the recently demolished Pungo District Hospital in Belhaven, North Carolina could certainly attest to that. And you, right here in Franklin, saw it last year with the Mission Health Hospital Network. Who could have realized that when Mission began closing down facilities in 2015, that it would lead to the creation of so many disparities? First, the unit at Transylvania Regional Hospital in Brevard servicing 33,000 residents. Then in July of 2017, when the not-for-profit Angel Mission Center announced that it would discontinue labor and delivery services for pregnant women affecting 40,000 residents, positioning itself to be sold to a for-profit entity. Then at the end of September, the labor and delivery unit at Blue Ridge Regional, affecting 33,000, shut its doors. This is shameful. This is unacceptable, and you ought to put your legislators on blast. Every last one of them, from county commissioners to the legislators at the General Assembly. Come here, Mike Clampett. Come here, Kevin Corbin. You need to be put on blast. And the North Carolina NAACP stands ready to investigate, and if warranted, we will litigate. There have been major challenges this community has had to endure as a result of those closings. Pregnant women are now forced to drive at least 20 miles to give birth through the extremely dangerous winding roads in winter months. That just ain't right.
It's not right.
These winding mountain peaks are high and treacherous, especially in the winter months. And for women in labor, this poses a special concern. The number of infant deaths has reportedly increased. And that, my friends, just ain't right. But allow me to tell you for a few moments what is right. It's right to pay people a living wage and dignify their lives. There are far too many minimum wage jobs in North Carolina, and apparently there are quite a few right here in Macon County, since the poverty rates have increased since 2008. I'm here to tell you that $7.25 won't keep a dog alive. I said $7.25 won't keep a dog alive. I know. I have two of them at home in Greensboro myself. And $7.25 won't keep them, and their little poodles won't keep them alive. We must resist in power and demand that the minimum wage be raised to at least $15 an hour. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "It's a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages." Since 1995, I've been advocating for living wages. Back then, we were determined to support those who were attempting to break free from the system of wage slavery that had governed their lives. Wage slavery is when you make more debt than you do profit. When you are forced to work more hours to make ends meet. When the quantity of hours you work exceed the quality care you can provide your family, and when the money you make cannot help you afford affordable housing. That is wage slavery. By standing with those folk, we, the clergy, helped to elevate that labor protest to one with more prayer than picket signs, one with morals and not just murals. We began building a coalition for workers' rights and eventually won a union because we knew that all labor has dignity. I repeat, all labor has dignity. And that, I tell you, is right. So please go out and tell somebody that God's got something for the labor hater as well as the labor baiter. And let me tell you one last thing that is right. It is right for you to get out to vote. And it's more right that you mobilize others to get out to vote. And it is even more right that you vote against the 6 constitutional amendments that will be on your ballot. They are vague, they are dishonest, and they are unconstitutional. All of them. That's why every former governor of the state of North Carolina, Democrat and Republican, are urging people to vote against those amendments. Early voting starts in 2 days, and it is 22 days until Election Day. Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of democracy. Do I have any good people in this audience today? Can I convince you to repeat after me? Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of democracy. One more time. Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of democracy. Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of democracy, resist in power, and vote. As long as there is a hint of segregation, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there is mass incarceration, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there are unequal schools, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there are people living in poverty, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there are women whose rights are being denied, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there are dishonest wages, we must resist in power and vote. As long as there is substandard housing, we must resist in power and vote. And as long as the United States has the world's most expensive health care system and refuses to expand Medicaid and United Health Care for all, we must resist in power and vote. Can you say that with me? We must resist in power and vote. We must resist in power and vote. As long as injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, we must resist in power and vote. Now more than ever before, the NAACP must be so strong in numbers and so effective in method that no one, no mayor of any city, no governor of any state, no congressman of any party, no president of the United States, and no foreign ambassador will dare to commit any indignity against poor people or people of color without realizing that the NAACP will challenge them on the platform, in the press, in the courts, in the streets, and at the ballot box. It is the will of God that we resist counteract corruption, not at some times or in some ways, but at all times and in all things always. We have to resist in power and vote. I'll say it one more time. Make no mistake about it. This election is all about power. And we can shift our relationships of power when we resist in power and vote. When I say, what do you want? You say justice. What do you want?
Justice.
What do you want?
Justice.
When I say, when do you want it? You say now. When do you want it?
Now.
When do you want it?
Now.
When I say, how do you get it? You say vote. How do you get it?
Vote.
How do you get it?
Vote.
Let that be the message that comes out of your mouth and rolls from your tongue until November 6th at 7:30 p.m. How do you get it?
Vote.
How do you get it?
Vote.
Get out the vote.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Spearman. Let's give it another hand. Go out and vote. Registration time is over, but you can still register for absentee vote. We have forms in this table out there. If you are not registered to vote in your current address, you can still register for absentee vote. You can register on the polling places in your area. You can also do the following. You can join the NAACP and carry forth the work of justice. We have membership forms in this table as well. If you have those pledge cards that we passed around, okay, we are collecting them for today. Please bring those so that we can remind you to vote. Also, this Saturday, October 20th, at Liberty Baptist Church in Silva, we have a regular membership meeting of the NAACP branch of Jackson County. We have a special program on the closing of Angel Labor and Delivery 1 year on, and what the effects are in our region and across the country of the closing of these rural centers as well. I want to thank Roberta and Brooke and Caleb and John and Reverend Spearman for coming to us and sharing their testimony today. Please give them another hand. It is disheartening to learn about the loss of life, especially among the very young and the infants among us. I have known young men my age who have died gunned down for doing the work of justice and equality, much as I'm doing today. It is my burden, just as it is of all of us activists, to speak to those who have been silenced through violence. But we can still carry them in our heart. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus talks to his disciples and says, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you be drowned in the depth of the ocean." All of these issues are millstones around our necks, and we cannot ignore them. We are guilty of the greatest moral failures if we let people, even infants and children, to die from poverty in the richest nation ever to exist. Blaming the poor and claiming that the United States does not have an abundance of resources to overcome poverty are false narratives used to perpetuate economic exploitation, exclusion, and deep inequality, and future generations will not forgive us if they have to walk over the graves of mothers and their infants in the gravesites in these mountains forevermore. We carry our dead. We speak for our dead. And our dead become resurrected in our hearts when we speak truth to power, when we march, when we pray, when we demand, when we sing, when we work for justice, even our dead little ones are with us, and we are bringing our dead and the spirits with our hearts at the ballot bags. So fellow countrywomen who have died for us, who have access for us in the ballot box, they paid for this right with our blood. And we must vote this, remember, and we must get our numbers up and share our work with us. Our votes matter, and that's why they're trying to silence them. I call on you to vote and get your neighbors to vote and to keep pressure on our elected officials even after the election through our work with the NAACP. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming, and I want to invite Father Jonathan again to close us with a benediction. Thank you so much.
As we go from this place to resist in power and to vote and to make a moral choice for a better world, for a better society, to show love towards our neighbors. My prayer for each one of us, for our community, for our families, for this nation, is that we do not become that which we resist, that we overcome evil with good, that we fight hate with love, and that the blessing of God, who made us in God's image to love one another, will be upon us in this fight and in this resistance, this day and every day. Amen.